This is kind of dramatic walking all the way across here. We didn't sort of plan it that way. We just ended up sitting over there. I want to do a couple things. First is I want you to know about the best kept secret about the university. Do you know what that is? The best kept secret is what it's like after school's out and the late spring here in May and early June. And anybody who lives here knows that. So after having our family been here in May and the first part of June the last couple of years, we thought we ought to make it work for more people to be able to be here, as it is fantastic, beautiful time of year. So we're going to blow up, like inflate, not explode. We're going to blow up what we're calling late spring term, this 6-week term, in part because the system has just changed, so Pell Grants and federal education support is now available for summer. And this kind of changes a whole bunch of things. So we're going to double the number of classes that are available, and Associate Provost Jeremy is going to say something in his handsome beard about what's going on here. But it's a big deal.
Thank you. So as President said, we'd really like to double the number of classes, but also provide a real guarantee. This is one of the concerns that students had, that President and the Provost have heard, that provide courses that are going to be offered on a consistent basis so that we can plan ahead. So if you know that you're going to need a course in the future, you can plan for a summer. This summer, the courses will be up very soon. We're going to add some more shortly, but that'll allow people to use this in conjunction with the regular school year to be able to lighten the load, to graduate on time. If you have one semester that's kind of tough because of a sport or something else, then you can plan ahead and plan to take 6 courses in the summer.
6 hours.
Six courses, not 6 courses. 6 hours. Thanks. It's great to have an autocorrect.
This is why I'm here.
6. You don't want to take 6 classes in the summer. That's way too many. 6 credit hours would be 2, and we think that's the perfect amount to make it really worth your while. And so we think the cost is going to be better for that amount. Pell Grants will come in when you take 6 hours, and we really want to make it better. And I think the President and the Provost have done a great job of responding to the concerns that especially students have had about May term and trying to make it better.
And our esteemed Associate Provost.
Yes.
So you should look at this. It is a great time of year to be here, and it sort of changes the world if you can count on being able to pick up an extra 6 hours, because it means you can make your normal schedule during the year a lot more consistent with the high level of activity that most people have here. There are some other things coming that we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks that are going to be other kind of major things for next year. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I should tell you, Steve and Bobbie Sandberg are spectacularly good people, and their parents are here. And I'd like their parents to stand up because they came out from Utah to be here with us. So thank you for being here. If you were at the first multi-stake fireside this year, you would have heard President Doxey explaining how we're all related to the Doxeys. The Sandbergs are too. You should know that. I met Steve at a conference of presidents of independent universities, which he was helping run as the deputy chief counsel at BYU. This is a brilliant man who is interacting at the highest levels of the law all of the time, and is responsible for all the things relating to religious liberty and privacy and Title IX and all of things related to standards and maintaining standards and so on, all the issues that are important to a university and to BYU in particular, for all of the BYU campuses, for all of the church higher education system, and was involved with a couple of the major Supreme Court cases that have been decided in the last year, and we were able to work together a little bit on those. So it's great to have him here. So I'll give the microphone back to Deidre.
Thank you. So I have to tell you how great summer term is if any of you are deciding. And here's a real offer. If you decide to stay for summer term, you see me, and I will give you 5 different hikes to do every Saturday while you're here. They are so beautiful, and I can tell you about that. At the close of our convocation today, the benediction will be offered by Alexandra Stiles, Arts Senator, and we will sing our SVU anthem, Love One Another. Steve and Bobbie Sandberg live in Provo, Utah, where Steve serves as Deputy General Counsel at Brigham Young University. They are the parents of 6 children, ranging in age from first grade to freshman in college. Bobbie received her BA in linguistics from BYU and a master's in BYU's English Language Center and at an English language school in Taiwan. Steve received his BA in English from BYU and JD from Columbia Law School. At BYU, his duties include government relations and protecting BYU's religious liberty. Since they've been married, they lived in Taiwan, New York, Alaska, California, and Utah. They love running, hiking, skiing, camping, and being in the outdoors. Bobbie and Steve.
Thank you. Let's see, is that on? Okay. Thank you so much for that introduction and for welcoming us here to campus. My back off? Try again. Okay. I don't know, I still don't hear it.
We didn't plan this. This isn't part of the funny part, so you can.
Okay. No?
Do you want to take mine?
You're on.
Let me just start with you here, Bobbie.
Talk into this. Do you want me to do that? Okay, great. I'll take this off then. Okay. All right. We really are really happy to be here today. Your campus is beautiful, and we've felt so warmly welcomed from everyone we've interacted with. It's really fun to be part of this. So we want to talk today about the importance of keeping laughter in our lives. I called my parents and told them that this is what we were thinking of talking about today. And I admitted that I was feeling pretty nervous about our topic. And I said to my mom, "Mom, we're talking about laughter, and I'm not funny." And my mom actually said, "I know." So that's a great start, right? It's true that actually we really aren't a stand-up comedian type of personalities, but the more we've thought about this topic, the more committed we feel to the idea of having really good, healthy humor in our lives every day. And we're guessing that this is a topic that's important to you guys too, because we have children who are young adult age kids and teenagers. And for our kids, finding something to laugh at is just hugely important. In fact, they spend more hours than I would like to admit online trying to find funny videos or vines that they're going to share with their friends, or watching late night comedians or stand-up comedy shows or TV shows or movies and so on, right? It's big business right now to create anything that's going to get a comedic response from others. So in fact, my one daughter really couldn't wait for my son to get his wisdom teeth out because she was so excited to get her video of him coming out of anesthesia so she could post it online. So as much as we love laughing and we love talking about laughing, there is kind of a tension for us as Latter-day Saints, because we also know that there's a lot of laughter around us that is really inappropriate or crude or distasteful. In fact, in the Doctrine and Covenants, 88:69, it says, Cast away your idle thoughts and your excessive laughter far from you. And so we kind of have that contrasted with this idea that we know there's really good humor that will help release stress or bring us together as families or help us to feel happy. And so we have contrasting scriptures like this one from Proverbs 17:22 that says, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine." So as we talk about laughter today, what we'd like to do is to kind of talk about how we can distinguish between these two extremes of laughter. The one that's very appropriate and makes our lives so much happier and so much better, and the laughter that the scriptures actually say is sin and can be really destructive in our lives.
And let's start with the scripture you're all familiar with, and Bobbie and I think it helps distinguish between appropriate and inappropriate celebrations, which extensions include things like laughter and in making merry. And it's my favorite parable in the scriptures. It's Luke chapter 15. And verse 11 begins this way. A certain man had 2 sons. And you know how the rest of it goes for the most part. It's the younger son takes what part falls to him and then goes to a far country and wastes it in riotous living. He comes to himself, and when he's yet a great way, he basically determines he's going to go back and tell his dad, I've sinned before heaven and thee, and I'm not even worthy to be your son. And he goes back home, and he's yet a great way off. I love this part about it because the dad at that point has probably no idea what his son's heart is like right then. It may be that the only thing he knows is that he's alive. And he sees him a long way away, and he runs to him. And he falls on his neck, and then the son says what he was going to tell his dad. I've just not, I've wasted my life. And the father's response is to throw a big party, to have this celebration with music and dancing. The older son hears it outside, asks a servant what's going on, and then he's angry because he didn't ever get a party, and he'd been doing the right stuff all along. The father's response is similar. This father goes out and entreats the older son. And the parable is called the prodigal son, and prodigal means excessively wasteful or lavish. And really the prodigal son had also been a profligate son. He had basically, the Latin root of profligate means you basically brought yourself to ruin through vice. The older son has the same reaction though, and yet the father tells both of them, you're both always with me, and all that I have is yours. He tells that to the older son. The part that we want to focus on is this. He says, and I just want to read it exactly. He says, explaining why they're having this celebration, it was meet that we should make merry. Meet in the Greek means necessary. That's the translation. So it was necessary that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. So the framework I want to put up is the younger son's riotous living and spending all, and this celebration when he's found again. And that distinction between those two, that they both involve some sort of excitement and celebration, but having that distinction will guide us as we go through and how to have the right kind of laughter in our lives.
Okay, so what we want to do is talk about 3 kind of distinctions in humor. The first one that we want to talk about is the difference between light-minded humor and light-hearted humor. And we kind of want to define that as laughter that's light-minded shows a lack of respect for things that are serious. And light-hearted laughter, on the other hand, would be the kind of laughter that allows us to see a situation in a way that's cheerful or to kind of brighten it in a more appropriate way. For instance, one night, as Steve was saying our prayers that we were saying together before we went to bed, Steve prayed that we would be able to have a fitful night's sleep.
I'm an English major, so I messed it up.
And after he finished, I said, I don't think I can say amen to that. But I wasn't being light-minded, right? I wasn't making fun of a serious prayer. We were just having a little lighthearted laugh over his, mistake on a word. And yet it's funny now because every time one of us has a bad night's sleep, he'll say to me, wow, that prayer just keeps getting answered. So all of us have been in situations where that become emotionally charged and have a potential for hurt feelings, either because of anger or embarrassment or other high emotions. And so we've found that in a situation like that becomes a highly emotional situation, a lighthearted, humorous response can be a huge benefit in our lives because of the way that it helps dissipate some of those emotions. So one time when I was teaching our kids about this, I referred back for them to a visit that we made to my parents who were living in Hawaii. And while we were there, we loved to go out to this point in Laie, where the rocks kind of come out to a point and the waves flow in from two directions right there. So each time the waves come in and hit up on those rocks, the spray just shoots up into the air. And our kids thought it was so fun to stand out there and just wait for the waves to come and feel the water just drench them as they sprayed up around them. And we talked about that and contrasted it with the idea of also in Hawaii when we go to the beaches and we spend time on these beautiful, long, sandy beaches. And we love to find ones, since we have some younger kids, where the waves flow in really slowly and hit the long, sandy stretches, and then they just retreat so that the younger kids can really enjoy playing in the water there. So, as I was talking to our kids about highly emotional experiences, I compared that to these waves and how when we have a wave coming at us, that's like an emotional experience coming at us, we have a choice of whether we're going to be like these rocky outcroppings or like that long sandy beach. And if we choose to meet the emotion with a light-minded response, not recognizing either the seriousness of it or with an equally emotional, angry response, then the reaction is like the waves. It explodes. And if we choose instead to be more like the sand of a beach, then, and for our point today, we would like to say that a lighthearted, humorous response can allow us to be like that, then the wave can flow in and flow right back out and dissipate, and the energy decreases. And so, of course, as I was teaching our kids this principle, I said, so we are Sandbergs. So we are going to be sand, not rocks. So let me give you a couple of situations where lighthearted laughter helped dissipate a situation that could otherwise be highly volatile.
So a friend of ours told us a story about a United Airlines flight attendant who was on a real flight with real passengers, but she herself was in training. And a very grumpy passenger had basically been demanding the whole flight. He called her over after she'd served him his meal and took the potatoes and dumped them in her hand and said, "These are bad potatoes." So this attendant feels this huge stress. She's being observed. This man is really, obnoxious. But she looks at the potatoes in her hand and she points at him and says, "No, bad potatoes, naughty potatoes." And then she puts them back on his tray and says, "Sir, I don't think they'll trouble you anymore." And it was so disarming that the man just started laughing. And then when he laughed, everyone around them laughed, and pretty soon everyone then realized how wonderful, like she had resolved it like the sand. She just dissipated it. She could have been just as angry because she had potatoes in her hand, but she resolved it in the right way.
One time when my grandma and grandpa were serving as mission presidents in San Diego, they had a very enthusiastic elder who came up to my grandma and, wanting to pay her a compliment, said, "Sister Winder, you are just massive." And my grandma decided to laugh instead of being offended, and again, dissipated what could have been an emotional situation for her. Another friend of mine talked about how laughter helped her choose to not be embarrassed in a situation. She posted this on her social media account. She said, "Why, yes, I did walk into my room this morning, shut the door behind me, and take off my pajama pants before realizing that this pest control technician was in there spraying.
So I also want to point out one thing here too about a potential difference between being lighthearted and light-minded. Light-minded laughter almost always shows a lack of respect for things or for situations that are important or even sacred, things that are serious. We have all situations in our lives and in the lives of those we love where people are dealing with serious things like financial difficulties or abuse or medical conditions, death, childlessness, or just loneliness. All of these things, all of these extraordinarily difficult things happen to us at different points in our lives. For some people, it's a continuous part of life. And our injunction from the Lord, similar to when he says it's necessary or meet that we should make merry, we also need to mourn with those that mourn and lift up the hands that hang down and strengthen the feeble knees. So in devastating life circumstances, we need to be really careful not to make fun of what is going on, but instead to find ways to laugh or to find escape valves when difficult things are going on. Elder Richard G. Scott taught us it this way. He said, "Another principle is to be cautious with humor. Loud, inappropriate laughter will offend the spirit. A good sense of humor helps revelation. Loud laughter does not. A sense of humor is an escape valve for the pressures of life." Our friends had a very difficult situation happen to them. They were away on a 2-week camping trip, and they came back to their home in Utah. They'd been in Northern California. They were dirty and tired, and they opened up the front door to a terrible smell. And what had happened is about a day or two after they'd left, the high-pressure valve, the water valve that connects to their upstairs toilet, had sprung a pinhole leak. And it had sprayed into the drywall upstairs and had been spraying for at least 9 or 10 days. So in that time, let's see if I can pull up in that time, all of the drywall and all of the insulation in the whole house had basically filled with water and collapsed in their whole house. So this is what they came home to. And just the smell also, I have to tell you again, the smell is real. The basement had probably about 1.5 feet of water that had collected. So this is Christian and Sarah. They came home and all of their belongings are thrashed. There was one room that hadn't had water damage to it. And they were laughing. They called me up and said, "Can you come over and help us?" We were trying to dry out some papers. We were trying to help them out. And what they were laughing about was this. When they walked in the door, Sarah's first response wasn't to call out to Christian and say, "Can you help me?" She said, "We need Gordon." Gordon is their neighbor and home teacher and a handyman. And so Christian's like, "Wait a minute, I can't help you?" So they were laughing about this thing about how they were joking among themselves about responding to it. And they took such a light-hearted response to this that it made all of us helping them have a better experience through it. That expression of light-hearted response is actually something we have to work at. Meaning we have to think through in a difficult situation to say, "I'm going to decide to approach life this way." They'd been doing that their whole lives, so when something really traumatic came, they were able to approach it with that response.
Yeah, and it wasn't that they didn't see the magnitude of the situation or mourn the real loss, but just that they were able to find little things in the middle of the situation that they were able to smile about. And that actually is one of the ways that laughter can then be just an escape valve for some of the pressures that we're feeling in the middle of a really hard situation. So there's an increasing body of research about the physiological effects of laughter. The Cancer Treatment Centers of America, their website actually talks about some of the potential benefits of laughter therapy in cancer patients. It said that studies have showed that episodes of laughter helped reduce pain, decrease stress-related hormones, and boost the immune system in their participants. And then I loved this. One of the recreation management professors at BYU, Gary Palmer, said, Studies show that humor and laughter help people live longer, happier lives, be more creative and productive, and have more energy with less physical discomfort. Humor reduces stress, fear, intimidation, embarrassment, and anger. Laughter also has extraordinary healing power. When a person laughs, blood pressure decreases, heart rate and respiration increase, and the body releases endorphins, and depression declines. After the laughter subsides and you relax again, that good feeling has a lasting effect, even until the next day. So a good friend of mine read us a book with similar studies and information as what this professor just quoted. And in fact, the book that she read suggested that we laugh every day almost like we exercise, that we should work that into our schedule. And so she decided to try it. So she went in her room, sat down on her bed, and just started forcing herself to laugh. Because the research actually shows it doesn't even matter if our laughter is forced or if it's real. We still have the same physiological effect from it. So she sat there laughing on the edge of her bed, and she thought, this is hard, and this is really awkward. And all of a sudden, she heard a noise. So she stopped, and she looked over, and her husband had walked in the room and really thought she maybe was losing her mind. But it's funny because then when she saw him, all of a sudden, it seemed funny to her instead of being forced, and she started laughing naturally. And really said that since then, she does it every day. She goes in her room and she forces herself to laugh. And it gets funnier as she does it. And she makes her teenagers do it now too, because she thinks it really improves their outlook on the day. So I thought it would be fun for us to try it. Just for not 5 to 10 minutes like her book suggested. But I just want for a minute to have us all laugh. And I mean, even if you have to force it, and just see how we feel. And you might turn down Steve's mic, because he laughs really loud.
Okay, you start us.
Okay? Everyone laugh. Ready?
You're going to wrap it up further than a minute.
Okay. It really does get funnier, right? It gets funnier. Even if you force it, the more I hear myself, the more ridiculous I feel. And it gets easier. But the really nice thing is that those effects of that laughter actually stay with us so that we feel happier. We feel more able to face our day with optimism and a little bit more cheer when we've had just our laughter exercise for the day. Oh, let's see. I have one more example of this. Okay, so my parents served as mission presidents, and they were serving at the time when the mission age decreased, and so they had a lot. I mean, they usually had about 200 missionaries, but then all of a sudden they got even more than that, and their lives were just full of a lot of pressure. And at that point, they needed to find outlets for just little ways to laugh here and there so that they could release some of that stress. And this little video was one they found online, and for some reason it just struck them as so funny that they couldn't stop laughing about it, and they couldn't stop sharing it because they thought it was so funny. So we wanted to show you today.
It's not playing.
And close your eyes and just fall down, okay? Don't worry.
Okay, then Lauren's going to catch you.
Close your eyes. Okay.
Okay, it's called the trust fall. Okay, trust fall. Ready, set, go.
Isn't that horrible? Anyway, this little video had nothing to do with missionary work, but it just allowed them a little escape valve from some of those pressures and really help them feel happier and able to face their own pressures again. So once again, coming back to that story of the prodigal son, it was meet or necessary that they should be married because it really made their lives better. So the second distinction we want to talk about is the difference between demeaning laughter and uplifting laughter, and especially the effect that that kind of laughter has on our relationships. Positive and uplifting laughter really strengthens relationships. It can unite us and give us a feeling of, shared history together. But by contrast, demeaning laughter can destroy relationships, especially jokes that make fun of or are cruel. They really create a lack of trust. President and Sister Hinckley were pretty masterful at using this kind of uplifting laughter in their lives. Sister Hinckley said, "We tried not to take ourselves too seriously. We learned that you get in trouble when you do that." And I think that's really key. Learning not to take ourselves too seriously and being able to laugh at ourselves can really be one of the best ways to let humor strengthen our relationships.
Elder Worthland told a story that I want to just read. It's beautiful. He said, "I remember when one of our daughters went on a blind date. She was all dressed up and waiting for her date to arrive when the doorbell rang. In walked a man," you probably remember this because it was given at General Conference. "In walked a man who seemed a little old, but she tried to be polite. She introduced him to me and my wife and the other children. Then she put on her coat and went out the door. We watched as she got into the car, but the car didn't move. Eventually, our daughter got out of the car and, red-faced, ran back into the house. The man that she thought was her blind date had actually come to pick up another sister who had agreed to be a babysitter for him and his wife." So, Elder Worthland continues, "We all had a good laugh over that. In fact, we couldn't stop laughing. Later, when our daughter's real blind date showed up, I couldn't come out to meet him because I was still in the kitchen laughing. Now, I realized that our daughter could have felt humiliated and embarrassed, but she laughed with us. And as a result, we still laugh about it today."
So my grandpa was also really good at not taking himself too seriously. So one time we gathered for a family brunch, and my mom brought this big tray of cinnamon rolls. So he was filing through the line, getting his food, and happened to be walking directly behind my mom when he said, "Sue, your buns sure look good today." Now, you have to know my grandpa always called rolls buns, so he really did mean to compliment her cinnamon rolls. But the rest of us just died laughing at his unfortunate choice of words. And he chose at that point to just laugh too, and not to be offended or worried about it. And now there are just a lot of times in our family when one line like that will come back and someone will say, "Oh, your buns sure look good today." And we all just laugh about it, not just because it was funny at the time, but also because it's this shared memory of something that we all remember, that time together as a family and how much we love my grandpa, and we remember those good times together. And so it's a simple thing, but brings a lot of sense of unity as a family. One of the other fun family stories happened to our oldest son, Tanner.
Yeah, Bobbie says happened to. I was the one the reason it happened to him. And this is another family story where usually our kids pour their own milk and cereal, and this particular day I handed a bowl of cereal with milk in it and glanced at another child as I handed it to him and ended up dumping all of it. He was dressed in his Sunday clothes to go to church, dumped it down his head and shirt and everywhere, but he didn't immediately stop me. And so I ended up dumping the whole bowl as I was looking over, and then he just started laughing, and he said, "Wow, milk feels different from water when it runs down your back." And so now we joke about that at cereal, breakfast time all the time because he was good-humored about it and allowed all of us just to laugh about it too.
Some of you probably have heard Sister Hinckley's quote where she said, "The only way to get through life is to laugh your way through it. You either have to laugh or to cry, and I prefer to laugh. Crying gives me a headache." We really have found that it's especially important for us to use laughter in our parenting. Sister Hinckley told about how sometimes laughter helped them not overreact to their children's little crises that would come every day. In fact, she told this story. "It was always better to laugh, like the day I took a beautiful casserole from the oven and my 6-year-old boy said, 'Mom, how come you baked the garbage?'" So I found that when I'm struggling with a child, that if I can just find a way to get one step back from a situation, that sometimes I can see the humor in it a little bit better. Let me just show you one example, and I hope you don't think of me as a bad mom. So we took our family on a trip to Alaska. And while we were there, this is our daughter Kate, and at the time she was 18 months. And she really was going through a stage where she just threw horrific tantrums. And for some reason, she got upset as we were at this big game park visiting all these Alaskan animals, and she just threw herself down in this horrible tantrum. And I really didn't know how to help her. I was kind of beside myself. But all of a sudden, I looked up, and I noticed that she was having this massive tantrum in the front of the most serenely looking, calm-looking moose. And it just struck me as so funny that I took a picture of it. Because somehow that contrast of her emotions and this mellow moose just was really funny to me. So even when I took that picture, I knew that that was like that one step back for me. I knew that I was going to look back on this and think it was funny instead of just horrible like it felt in the moment. And it helped me to be a better mom, really. It helped me to be calmer, to be able to deal with the situation better. So I think when we find these little ways to see the humor in our lives, then sometimes we can just set aside our frustration and really focus on the relationship. For me, taking pictures or writing stories or actually even just sharing the experiences with grandparents, others that can see the humor in it, helps me get that one step back.
We can just skip that and go into this one.
Okay. This is our same daughter, Kate, a little later now. And one of the things that I did, again, as far as taking pictures was that she loved to put together her own combinations of clothes. This is her as about a 4-year-old. And she always chose stuff that was crazy. They didn't match. They didn't go together. And so it usually frustrated me, actually, until this let's see, we're getting through all of them. Okay, until one day when she came down and so she went back up, she put on everything that she wanted to wear that day. And they always just had layers and layers of combinations of clothes and patterns and colors and who knows what. But I just said, fine, you wear what you want. I'm not going to fight you about it. And she came down and she stood in this outfit and she struck a pose and she said, "See, Mom, I told you it would be cute." And so, of course, I grabbed my camera and I took a picture, and really, I just started taking pictures all the time when she would come down in these crazy outfits. And I just decided, I'm not going to be embarrassed about this. This is her personality. She's expressing it. And in fact, it became really endearing to me. So now she's quite a bit older, and she doesn't dress weird anymore. She has a good sense of style now. But she's still very strong-willed. But actually that experience, when she was younger, of learning to take a step back from it and appreciate that side of her personality has helped me to still feel like it's an endearing part of her personality instead of frustrating.
Taking that step back and then also sharing it with others can be a great part of keeping laughter in our lives and then sharing it with them. Bobbie has a friend who's a terrific writer. And she shared this with us about what had happened in their family. She said, "The day after Halloween, Colin woke up to the sad realization that instead of making it to the toilet in the middle of the night, he made it to the plastic cauldron that held all of his Halloween candy." Oh, tragedy. Oh, sad, sad, candy-soaked day. Fortunately for Colin, Jane and Sam made generous contributions to their brother in his time of grief. Unfortunately for Colin, this small event has made me crack up over and over again, and I am way too willing to share the story. But we're glad she did. A friend and I both had experiences professionally where someone criticized the work we'd done in the media. And at times like that, the response of friends can be very, very helpful. My friend is Elder Keach, who's just recently passed away, and he was a phenomenal lawyer, one of my mentors. But one time, a newspaper wrote that the law firm he worked for was for the Mormon Church like the Death Star, and that Von Keach, who was one of the most just pleasant men, was its Darth Vader. And so you can see this is actually the setup at his funeral. And they have this, all of his law firm colleagues would give him Darth Vader things. You can see the shirt that says, "I am your daddy," you know. And they quoted the media piece there too, and there's his Lego Darth Vader man with a gavel in his hand. That gavel, actually, when he became a general authority, they took that Darth Vader and they put it on his shelf with family pictures and some other statues. It was that, but this was a way that the colleagues rallied around him and said, we know who you really are. And Elder Keach took such a good-hearted response to it that it made it fun for everybody. I had my own too. I do a lot of legal work for BYU, and when BYU went independent and then joined the West Coast Conference, I was privileged to do that work and work with ESPN. The following year, though, we were in negotiations where the Big East wanted us to join their conference. And I ended up getting quoted in the national news as being a piece of work. And you feel kind of frustrated, but my friends would text me, and then this was probably the most beautiful thing. The dean of students at BYU gave me this statue, and it says "piece of work" on it. And he said he had also been called a piece of work because of some things that he'd done in the student life area. And he said, this is a prestigious award. In fact, it can only be given by one person who has been called a piece of work in the media to another. And then he wrote this whole email. He said, "Dear Steve," he quotes Hamlet, "what a piece of work is man." And he compares to the great people in the history like J. Golden Kimball or Nephi. I think it was Mike Tyson was in there too. I don't know. Just all these people have been called a piece of work. Maybe they deserved it more too. But this really made me feel welcomed and made me able to laugh about it. And then among our colleagues in our office, they still call me the piece of work. But it's in a lighthearted way that we can all enjoy it too. And it made me realize so many times when someone else gets called out for something, deserved or undeserved, they need our outreach. And that laughter can make it so that we're all having a better time and we can get through those times.
Yeah, so you can see how important uplifting laughter is in strengthening and building relationships. And that's mostly what we focused on. But of course, the opposite is true, that any kind of demeaning, critical, unkind joking is so detrimental to our relationships. And I got thinking about a really simple example that I had just as a college student when I was hanging out with a group of friends that I thought was really great, and they really were great. But in the course of hanging out one time, I did something really clumsy and fell down. And for some reason, everyone just thought it was so funny that it kept getting brought up. And not just that day, but then each time as we would hang out, there was always this joke about how clumsy I was. And in fact, I kind of felt like everyone was watching, hoping they were going to see me do something clumsy again, like it was just it just became a really uncomfortable thing for me, to the point that I really got to a point where I thought, I think I'm done hanging out here, because it wasn't fun. I just always felt like I was being laughed at instead of that I was part of, that we were all laughing together. And of course, that's a very minor example, really, of the negative effect of demeaning humor. There's so many more dramatic examples that we see around us, really scary things of people who end up doing physical harm to themselves or to others because of being made fun of. So I think we have to be so careful with demeaning or critical humor.
And we have to remember that everybody is a child, a divine child of heavenly parents. Every one of us matters. And that distinction is the most important thing, too. I think with Bobbie's grandpa's experience, with Elder Worthland's daughter's experience, with my son Tanner's experience we shared with you, if any of them, for whom the retelling of those jokes had become painful, we should stop promulgating those things when it becomes painful to them. And that because it starts moving into a mocking role. Instead of being of good cheer, we're mocking a person. I want to read just two quick scriptures about how Satan actually uses laughter in a devious way. In 1 Nephi chapter 8, we learn about how mocking laughter is a characteristic of the people in the great and spacious building who point. This chilling description in Moses 7:26. And he beheld Satan, and he had a great chain in his hand, and it veiled the whole earth with darkness. And he looked up and laughed, and his angels rejoiced. There are other scriptures similar to that too. 3 Nephi 9:2. For the devil laugheth, and his angels rejoice. This laughter reflects hatred and pleasure in other people's suffering, and we always need to be careful to avoid that.
Contrast that with what we know about the Savior's treatment of people that he found in discouraging or hopeless circumstances. I was thinking of the man who came to him sick of the palsy, and he told him to be of good cheer. Or when the disciples came to him in the midst of a storm, and he said the same thing, to be of good cheer. He also said the same thing when he spoke to the Nephites who were about to be executed for believing in the signs of his coming. And in modern times, he said the same thing, be of good cheer, to Joseph Smith in the middle of physical trauma, financial stress, and spiritual challenges. So how can Jesus Christ, how can that be his response to us in our most dire, challenging circumstances, to tell us also to be of good cheer? Unlike Satan, who rejoices in suffering, Jesus Christ has compassion when we suffer. In fact, we know he came to earth so that he could descend below all things, so he would know how to succor his people in their infirmities. When Jesus Christ sees us suffering, he tells us to be of good cheer because more than any other person, he understands and he knows how he can help us. Sometimes he offers to help by bearing our burdens so they can be light. Sometimes he delivers us from pain, and sometimes he offers us peace that passes understanding. But no matter what he offers, he always offers us a hope that we can be of good cheer because we know we won't be alone in the sorrows that we're faced with. When we have faith in Christ, we know he understands and we trust that he'll help us. We can live with faith-based optimism. We can be of good cheer. Steve and I have been really impressed as we've listened to the faithful optimism of our Latter-day Prophets. Every challenge that they have as in leading a worldwide church comes directly to them. It comes across their desks. And so I would have guessed that it would be easy to get weighed down by the challenges that we're facing and that the church faces. And yet every time we hear them speak, the words that you hear instead are full of faith and hope and optimism.
Let's end with the words of President Russell M. Nelson that he said at the press conference when the new first presidency was announced. Though our world is filled with serious challenges, I am optimistic about the future and confident about the fundamental goodness of humankind. I give you my assurance that regardless of the world's condition and your personal circumstances, you can face the future with optimism and joy if you have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and his gospel.
We can live with the same optimism and faith and hope. We can, not because we gloss over the circumstances of our lives, but because of our complete confidence in Jesus Christ as our Savior. Just like our Latter-day Prophets, we can live with a faith and a hope that things will work out. And in this kind of hope, it really is meet that we should be merry.
We testify that God's plan for us is to have joy, and that he wants us to live with hope and good cheer, so he sent his only begotten Son to make that possible. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.